This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, starting off with global markets today, stocks recovered some lost ground as we saw crude prices lifting oil companies. But of course, investors' focus still remains on those rising COVID-19 cases in Europe. Now, most developing market stocks gained between 0.2% and 1.8% on the day, looking to snap a 5-day losing streak. Across Africa, markets were pretty subdued today. South Africa's JSE was little change as we saw investors there weigh the prospects of tighter monetary policy, of course, to curb inflation, as of course investors weigh the prospect of a tighter monetary policy there. Egypt's EGX 30 weighed down by a decline in a top lender, Commercial International Bank. Now, also coming up on today's show. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed leads his troops against Tigrayan forces from the war front. The 21st COMESA summit concludes in Egypt with a call for economic and regional integration. And we take a look at why some communities in Nigeria see the sunflower as a golden plant. Well, let's start off today's show in Ethiopia. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has been leading the Ethiopian civil war from the front lines. Now, this has been confirmed by the government spokesperson who saw Deputy Prime Minister Demeke Mekonnen Hassan, who is in charge of routine government business for now. Now, the military is fighting against Tigrayan rebels who say they are advancing towards the capital, Addis Ababa. The rebels earlier this week claimed they had captured the town of Shewa Robit to the northeast of the capital. Now, the United Kingdom is the latest country to ask its citizens to leave Ethiopia immediately. Meanwhile, the African Union is leading efforts to put an end to fighting, with little progress reported so far.
His Excellency, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, as per his promise and starting from yesterday morning, is giving directions through the national forces. Several political parties' leaders, including leaders of the ruling Prosperity Party, have marched onto the battlefront. Others, too, from different walks of life are doing the same in their large numbers. On the other hand, the rest of the leadership are busy engaged in other government activities, such as social, economic, and diplomatic works. Based on that, His Excellency Deputy Prime Minister, who is also our Foreign Minister, Demeke Mekonnen, will coordinate those efforts.
Well, let's now get the latest from the ground. We're joined by Girum Chala. He is in Addis Ababa. Great to have you with us, Girum. Now, there certainly have been mixed reactions to Prime Minister Abiy's move to go to the battlefront. Some are calling it heroic. Some are saying it was sort of a sign of desperation. Give us a sense. What is the latest on that plan? What is happening on ground? Are we seeing ordinary Ethiopians following him? And has it had any effect, of course, on TPLF's advance towards Addis Ababa?
Well, as you have heard it earlier from the Minister of Communication Services of Ethiopia, the Prime Minister is already on the ground leading the Ethiopian National Defense Force, the Special Force of Amhara, the militia from different parts of the country, and also perhaps ordinary Ethiopians at the same time. He's giving important military directions for the job to be done. According to him, that job is keeping Ethiopia intact, keeping its sovereignty and territorial integrity as it was before, and repelling TPLF-sponsored danger, according to them, away from the country. The reaction has been overwhelming. Different Ethiopians from different walks of lives are now joining the army in their thousands. People are being enlisted to be part of the Ethiopian National Defense Force. Famous Ethiopia's track and field runner Haile Gebrselassie, you know him from Olympic medals, several Olympic gold medals. He vowed officially to enter into the war, supporting the Prime Minister's move. Faisal Elisa, another Olympic medal winner, famous Ethiopian, is also vowing to enter this kind of war. Singers, artists, like I said, ordinary Ethiopians are also responding to this call. Now, this is one thing when it comes to Ethiopians coming together to defeat what they call an enemy, TPLF force. On the other side, the TPLF is saying that they are determined to continue fighting against Ethiopian National Defense Force, the Ethiopian government, until it's removed. They said that it is also posing an existential threat on them. But in general terms, and to answer your question particularly, the Prime Minister's move has been widely welcomed by residents of Addis Ababa and people across the country.
Well, we are also hearing, Girum, that much of northern Ethiopia is under a communications blackout. We're also hearing millions in Tigray and, of course, the surrounding regions. They are trapped and pretty much going hungry. So paint us a picture of how activity has been impacted right now on ground.
Well, I think we need a bit of a background before the communications blackout. When the war started a year back, due to what the government is calling a law enforcement mission after the TPLF force attacked the northern command in Ethiopia, things have started there. Because of the ongoing war since then, so many people have been evicted from their homes. To be more specific, in the Amhara regional state, more particularly, about 2 million people have been evicted. In the Tigray regional state, there is a food shortage. Children are dying because of food shortage. In the Afar regional state, the situation seems to be very, very similar. What we are trying to say here is that there are backgrounds for this story to happen. Now that there is a communication blackout, now that roads are blocked because of the ongoing war, the intensification of it, delivery of aid to the most vulnerable is becoming impossible. You remember there was an airlift happening because of the intensification of the war that has been stopped. The Ethiopian authorities have allowed flights to be resumed so that aid can be delivered to Kombolcha and Dese towns. Although there are these kinds of offers, there is no international organization that came forward to deliver those kinds of services. So in general terms, economic activities have been paused. Aid services, most important to keep people intact at least for now and keep them alive, are also being disrupted, and other works at the same time. So the bad side of war, according to experts, is affecting each and every individual, and more particularly civilians there.
Well, what is the latest, Girum, on recent reports that there's been fierce fighting over a plan by TPLF to try to cut a transport corridor that links, of course, landlocked Ethiopia with the region's main port in Djibouti? What's the latest on that? If they do succeed, what are the implications for Ethiopia?
There were dozens of attempts to control the Djibouti-Ethiopia main road, which passed through the Afar regional state, and that's according by TPLF, and that's according to the Ethiopian National Defense Force and government source that we have. By the way, that's a very strategic location. As we've said, Ethiopia is a landlocked nation. Every economic activity at the moment, especially when it comes to import-export trade, is happening through the port of Djibouti. So whatever is happening in that main road is going to directly affect each and every Ethiopian, and also the economy, even the war itself at the same time. So there were attempts made by the TPLF force. They themselves have been confirming these reports, TPLF source, that means of them trying to control some of the areas which are linking Ethiopia to the port of Djibouti. But so far, what we know that these attempts were not successful. The Afar Special Force, the Afar militia, alongside the Ethiopian National Defense Force, have been strongly controlling those areas from TPLF force infiltration, and they've been successful so far as business activities on this main road between Djibouti and Ethiopia remains to be clean, and it's open for traffic with no disruptions happening. On the other hand, also on the Sudan side, the story seems to be the same. Western Ethiopia is still strongly being controlled by the Ethiopian Defense Force. TPLF force have tried to open roads so that they can gain access for anything that they desire, but nothing of such sort happened. So in general terms, for roads important for economic activities of Ethiopia, Djibouti side or the border between Ethiopia and Sudan seems to be strongly being held by the Ethiopian force, and still is the situation at the moment, despite the fact that there were serious attempts and are still attempts by TPLF force to gain control of those areas.
Well, many thanks, Girum, for that update. We do have to leave it there. That, of course, is Girum Chala joining us in Addis Ababa. Now, the 21st COMESA summit has drawn to a close in Egypt's capital with a resolution by the bloc to strive towards economic and regional integration. Well, as Yasser Hakim now reports, member states agreed to boost ties in order to strengthen industrial integration and regional supply chains. That's amid disruptions caused by the pandemic.
Egypt has pledged to enhance close coordination and cooperation with the COMESA Secretariat during its presidency. The North African state assumed the rotating presidency of the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa at its 21st summit, which was the first since the outbreak of COVID-19.
There were a lot of developments since the 2018 summit in Lusaka, Zambia. There were important steps for economic closeness, but there are big challenges for the region and the world due to the negative effects of the coronavirus pandemic, and we are still suffering the effects in the region, and the recovery is slow.
Cairo is adamant on bringing immediate results despite the challenges faced by the bloc that's made up of close to 24 African nations. The value of intra-COMESA exports, which is already low at $11 billion, had dropped by about 11% in 2020 compared to a year earlier due to the pandemic-induced economic fallout.
Although the coronavirus pandemic has had its negative effects on the economic integration between the member states, however, there are also pre-existing challenges that had not been addressed. And that's what the officials here and the heads of states are saying, that they will try to speed up this process.
There are long-standing issues the continent has struggled to deal with, including cooperation in digital transformation and increasing investments in cross-border infrastructure.
There's been many challenges, and which they were there and they are still there. To move and trade digitally, electronically, through e-commerce, we need to improve infrastructure. We need to have capacity building. We need to train the human capital through education and many other sectors.
The liberalization of trade to make sure that they dismantle all the impediments, all the non-tariff barriers, and also dismantle what we call the barriers. There is also the question of making sure that the connectivity, the physical connectivity, which is the road transport, railway, water, maritime.
In spite of the hardships, there is still the belief that the required goals of economic integration can be a reality.
We have really made a lot of progress, as you might have seen. When we launched the free trade area in 2000, we had the intra-COMESA trade hardly 1.5 billion. Today we have almost 11 billion trade that is being conducted among all the COMESA member states, and there is a potential for more than 100 billions. And if we reach that 100 billion, our lives will be immediately improved.
But some officials are warning that action on the ground is more important than promises.
In the absence of time frames, time limits, it can be all talk. We've had several summits of this kind, and very little engagement within the region has been seen. But I'm very hopeful and very optimistic that we'll give each other timelines on how best we can achieve this.
The next few years will show if the will is there to finally achieve the dream of fully integrating the 21 states and more than 560 million people of the COMESA bloc. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta says that South Africa's Transnet rail engineering can be a leading partner for many other African nations. Transnet Rail Engineering, of course, is a state-owned manufacturer of railway components, including freight wagons, locomotives and passenger coaches. Now, Kenyatta was speaking on the final day of his three-day state visit to South Africa. CGTN's Yolisan Jamela has more.
The visit to this Transnet rail engineering facility in Pretoria is about showing off what the presidency calls South Africa's advanced capabilities in design, manufacturing and maintenance of rail-related equipment. Accompanied by Public Enterprise Minister Pravin Gordhan, Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta was shown around the facility.
We cover basically from research and design of rail stock and port equipment to manufacturing, assembly and maintenance, addressing coaches, locomotives, wagons, ports equipment. In terms of our ports equipment, we've recently designed and built our own port hauler. This was a significant technology shift for me, going from rail to vehicles, because they're obviously totally different in terms of the dynamics. But we're now in the position to supply South Africa with port haulers, which were previously all imported.
After the tour of the facility, the Kenyan leader remarked that Transnet could partner with other African countries in the development of a robust railway system that would help fast-track the integration of the African continent by facilitating the movement of people, goods and services at affordable costs.
It's been quite an eye-opener for myself, and indeed one of the most impressive things is just that clear understanding of the re-engineering or the reverse engineering that has actually taken place here, and a clear indication that I think Transnet can be a leading partner in working together with other African countries to restore their rail stock, and again, going back to what I said earlier, be a leader in helping the integration of our rail systems across the continent. And I look forward to a visit, which I think you'll be making in the near future, to see how we can deepen our collaboration, how we can work better together, and actually fast-track that process, which I once again want to say, our integration is going to be led by the kind of work that we've seen here.
This is the last stop as the Kenyan head of state concludes his state visit. From here on, President Kenyatta is off to the Eastern Cape province, where he's set to visit the Aspen Pharmacare that manufactures the J&J COVID-19 vaccines before he heads home. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
And now let's take a look at some corporate headlines today. Kenya Airways has signed a strategic partnership deal with South African Airways as the two airlines plan a Pan-African airline group by 2023. Now, the framework follows the memorandum of cooperation that the two airlines signed 2 months ago that will see the airlines work together to increase passenger traffic, cargo opportunities, and, of course, general trade. An international diaper manufacturer, Kimberly-Clark, has entered into a $45 million contract manufacturing deal that will see their flagship brand, Huggies, now produced in the Kenyan market. The firm has partnered with a local manufacturer, Sai Pharmaceuticals, in a deal that is set to directly create over 100 new jobs at the newly established factory. And South Africa's hotel industry looks to be getting back on its feet. The nation's biggest hotel operator, Shogo-san Hotels, says that improving room occupancies helped revenue triple in its half-year earnings report. However, the group still expects a return to pre-pandemic trading to take place towards the end of 2022. Now, Shogo-san reported income of just over $60 million for its first half, from about $21 million. And Apple has filed a lawsuit against Israeli cyber firm and NSO Group and its parent company Aussie Technologies for alleged surveillance and targeting of U.S. Apple users with its Pegasus spyware. Now, the iPhone maker is also seeking to ban NSO Group from using any Apple software, services or devices in order to prevent further abuse. Apple is the latest in a string of companies and governments to come after NSO. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are heading into a short break now, still coming up. Manufacturers in Nigeria decry uneven electricity prices. And players in the aviation sector meet in Kenya's capital to map the way forward after the coronavirus pandemic.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
The little tents here, bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Gas. So it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
Is the front line now after 9 days of fighting?
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from
within
the front
clear
line.
view of this front line position.
Welcome back. Now, investors in Nigeria's manufacturing sector are lamenting over what they've termed as uneven electricity pricing. The Manufacturers Association insists that a mismatch in government policies, as well as differences in electricity pricing across the country, poses grave challenges for the sector. That's in the face of epileptic power supply already in the country. Here's CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam with more.
Business is at its peak for 27-year-old fashion designer Jumat Abdulaziz, with lots of fabrics to sew and deliver to his customers before Christmas. But erratic power supply is hampering his work. And besides paying roughly $100 monthly for electricity subscription, Jumat spends an additional $90 to run his backup generator.
Sometimes when there is no light, I will buy fuel so that I can meet up with my schedule for the day. It affects my business a lot because sometimes in a week we do have lights maybe twice or once in a week, sometimes not every day.
Manufacturers and business owners like Jumat are complaining that their running costs been taking a toll on outputs. That's compounded by uneven pricing policy. For instance, where businesses and manufacturers in the nation's capital, Abuja, pay an average 38 naira for a unit of electricity, those in the commercial capital, Lagos, pay about 33 naira. In northwest Kaduna State, it costs 29 naira, and in northeast Yola, it's almost twice as much, at an average 51 naira.
For manufacturers, this is going to be a huge, huge problem because all manufacturers actually serve the same market. So if you have a situation where the manufacturer of, for instance, a particular product in Lagos, where the tariff is lower because of the demand-supply structure, is paying lower than the manufacturer, for instance, in Maiduguri or Kano, where the structure is different, it means that that manufacturer in Kano is now at a disadvantage.
The manufacturing sector has seen an uptake since the economy was reopened after the COVID-19 lockdown. And the Manufacturers Association wants a tariff structure that will give industry operators a level playing field.
We must find a way of ensuring that these distortions in the market do not arise from a policy framework that clearly gives preference to one set of manufacturers and another. And it disturbs growth because it does mean that investment will be tailored or perhaps directed towards those areas where the tariff is low. And to a large extent, therefore, you will have a problem of regional balance in terms of the growth of the economy itself and the growth of investment.
Nigeria, with its current gas, hydro and solar power plants, is capable of generating 12,500 megawatts of electricity, but struggles to dispatch an average 5,000 megawatts, not sustainable for its 200 million strong population. More so for the manufacturing sector that relies heavily on power to thrive. Manufacturers want industry players to ramp up power supply and create more uniform pricing across the country. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, players in the aviation sector are meeting in Kenya's capital to explore innovative ways to sustain the industry that, of course, has been battered by the coronavirus pandemic. Well, CGTN's Nick Mudimba attended the ongoing Africa Aviation Innovation Summit in Nairobi, and he filed this report.
The COVID-19 pandemic presented novel challenges for the aviation industry that saw passenger numbers drop by 90%. Like most airlines, Kenya Airways has been forced to diversify its business to remain sustainable. With the demands in aviation technology growing daily, the Kenyan flag carrier, in collaboration with plane manufacturer Embraer, are pushing for innovation in aviation that reduces the cost of operation in the airline industry. Embraer showcased its new E195 plane, dubbed the Profit Hunter, which, according to the manufacturer, adds more value to the client. The summit will bring together stakeholders from aviation, tourism, technology and startup industries to discuss ways to build resilient and sustainable business strategies post-COVID-19.
This is a great initiative by Kenya Airways that is the first in the continent of Africa, and we as Embraer look forward to take part in this great event.
The Aviation Summit will also explore opportunities with local startups and SMEs to co-create innovative solutions with aviation stakeholders for sustainable development of Africa. For Kenya Airways, reduction of operating costs through technology and innovation will be key to increase sales that dipped courtesy of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Within Kenya Airways, a section that we call the Fahari Innovation Hub, which we launched earlier in the year. And the purpose of this hub is to come up with new ideas that are implementable. So we've just extended this into the African space together with our partners to come up with ideas that can be implemented within the aviation space.
The summit's agenda will further analyze how the aviation industry has been forced to reinvent itself in the last few months following the outbreak of the pandemic, as well as explore prospects for air travel in the future. Some of the vertical forums will cover innovative technology, health and safety, aeropolitical issue and pricing. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Well, let's move on now. Kenya's third largest bank by assets has reported a 159% rise in net income to over $58.3 million for the first 9 months of this year. Net interest income was 19% higher at $180 million. The bank managed to slash its loan loss provisions by nearly a third, down to $81.9 million. Now, the bank's portfolio of digital loans, which are issued in collaboration with Kenya's largest telco, Safaricom, rose by 26% year-on-year to $3.8 billion. However, the loan portfolio on the bank's books shrunk by 4% to $1.9 billion, even as its holdings of government debt rose by 25% to $1.69 billion. Now, since the start of 2020, the bank's market cap has declined by nearly 30%. Its shares were 0.4% lower at 808.25 GMT. Well, earlier, my colleague Raman Yang spoke to NCBA's Managing Director, John Gashora. He started their conversation by exploring the delay in getting new risk pricing models for loans approved.
If I look at ourselves, it's not really a point of contention. Is that over time we have developed risk-based models that have been fairly complex, fairly specific to the type of business that we do, the target customers that we have, and in fact divided into our corporate, large corporates, SMEs, smaller corporates, retail, and obviously our digital banking. And so I guess the conversations we've been having with the central bank is how do you take all these formulas, simplify them well enough so that you can explain to any customer who walks through the bank that this is how your pricing is going to be determined based on this risk-based pricing formula that we have.
Do you expect to wrap that up by the end of the year, or is that something that you might essentially have closure on by, say, the middle of 2022?
Well, I think it's more likely sometime next year. And I say that really because, one of the big inputs that we have had to our credit formula has been CRB scores. Yeah? And given the fact that there is a CRB moratorium until September of next year, it means that we have to go back and we look at some of our formulas. And so that's why I do not think it will be done by the end of the year, but it should be close soon thereafter.
Okay, so getting back to your results, the size of the loan book did contract a little bit by about 4.2%, but your holdings of government securities actually did go up by a fair bit, up by around 25% compared to the same period last year. What sort of weaknesses are you seeing in demand for private sector credit as we essentially start to recover from the pandemic?
As you have mentioned, obviously there is a weakening on the lending side, but what you see is customer deposits closed up 11% year over year, 447 billion. That's about 45 billion growth in customer deposits. A lot of that, as you observed, has gone towards government credit or trade or the treasury, and the reason therefore, and because of that, you see therefore that there has been some softening on the private credit side. Two things to that I would like to mention. One is that we do have a very healthy pipeline of approved transactions waiting for drawdown. However, given that we're in COVID still, a lot of customers are taking time to decide to make those investments that they intend to make. And they continue delaying, looking at the supply chains, looking at, the business climate. Now that the curfew has been removed fully, I expect to see that pent-up demand that has built up will start to get satisfied by customers making drawdowns on the loans that we have approved. So we do expect to see a turnaround on the private sector side.
Should investors be expecting your portfolio of government debt to continue growing at roughly the same pace? Because, I mean, the year-on-year number here was about 25% going up to 189 or so billion Kenyan shillings in government securities. Should we expect similar growth at least through to end 2022?
Well, our view is that we are very ready to shift our lending into the private sector. But obviously that speaks a lot to customer demand. Customer demand is what we're looking at. As I said, we have many approved loans that have not drawn down. We also have many that we're considering that are not at the point of conclusion. Our hope is that we'll see some good growth there. So our projection of today is that we shall see a shift next year towards more private lending as opposed to government lending from the bank. So should investors expect that our government lending will grow at the same pace? I would not bet on it.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a short break now, but still to come. Barbados to cut ties to the British monarchy and become a republic at the end of the month. And we'll delve into why young people may no longer be the spendthrifts they are thought to be. Change is on the horizon. Through the shifting of time, Africa's emerging tech landscape is creating new channels.
There's a hunger for local African content globally.
Shaped by innovation, carved out by a new generation of digital entrepreneurs, sculpted by a mobile revolution, and trickling down to the most remote corners of the continent. TechSpot is seeking out the new concepts in technology, disrupting Africa's traditional sectors.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
And now here's a quick recap of other headlines this hour. Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has directed police in the country to secure processions which were planned for Thursday, November 25th, and also start releasing detainees from resistance committees. Now, he met the Police Command and Council of Ministers earlier on Wednesday. The meeting affirmed that peaceful expression and demonstration is a legitimate right in accordance with the principles of the December Revolution. Meanwhile, Libya's Elections Committee has closed applications for the presidential race. Dozens have applied as the country hopes to march towards stability after a decade of civil war. Now, the Elections Committee is reviewing the applications and says it will announce the final list of candidates by December 6th. In Uganda, joint anti-terror security agencies say they have detained 4 Somali nationals after recovering a suspected bomb device in their car. Now, the suspects were apprehended while trying to access Speak Resort Hotel in Munyonyo in the suburbs of Kampala. At the same time, Ugandan police say they have rescued over 80 children undergoing military training from these terror cells across the central and western parts of the country. And African First Ladies are on a mission to promote peace and development on the continent. The wives of African leaders made the commitment in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, this week at the first General Assembly of the African First Ladies Peace Mission. And that's a recap of other headlines this hour. Well, let's now turn our attention to international news. Barbados is set to finally cut ties with the British monarchy, marking the Caribbean islands' transition to a republic. This will see Queen Elizabeth removed as head of state and Governor-General Sandra Mason installed as president. Now, this is also the first time a realm has removed the Queen as head of state in nearly 30 years. Prince Charles will be expected to travel to Barbados to mark the Caribbean islands' transition. And of course, the decision is expected to be declared at a ceremony on November 30th, celebrating the country's 55th anniversary of independence from Britain. Barbados Prime Minister Mia Mottley adds that the time has come to leave behind the island's colonial past. And now to Turkey, where anxious shop owners have been protesting against the recent sharp depreciation of the country's currency, the lira. This was mainly driven by President Tayyip Erdogan's defense of rate cuts. Now, the lira, however, clawed back some losses on Wednesday after a 15% crash to record lows a day earlier. Here's CGTN's Mikal Bardavid with more.
The Turkish economy has been suffering as the lira fell to record lows. The currency lost 25% of its value since the beginning of the year. The latest depreciation comes following the central bank's decision to cut its policy rate by 100 basis points to 15% on November 18th.
Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, a self-described enemy of interest rates, believes lower interest rates will result in lower inflation. A day before the central bank's decision, he reiterated his stance, stating that he cannot be on the same path with those who defend high interest rates.
Meanwhile, many Turks are struggling to get by, as consumer inflation has reached nearly 20% in October.
There are serious problems with food prices. Food inflation is hovering around 25 to 30% and is seriously affecting the poorer sections of the society. Bread prices have risen by approximately 25% in the near term. Bread is the most important food product for Turkish people. There are no meals without bread.
The weakening of the lira is also having a major impact on import businesses.
Turkey is also importing at a very high rate, and energy is the foremost among products. Turkey is not in a very good position in terms of energy, so import rates are very high, especially for the petroleum products. For this reason, the increase in foreign exchange is directly reflected on energy prices.
Even business owners are deeply affected by the fall of the lira. One bicycle shop owner says he is forced to reflect the currency rate changes to product prices.
As the exchange rate goes up, purchasing power goes down, and people make budget restrictions.
While the Turkish economy continues to tumble, pressure on President Erdogan is growing. as polls are showing his popularity is also declining and opposition leaders are calling for early elections. Michal Bardavid, CGTN, Istanbul.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden says that the government will release about 50 million barrels of oil from the strategic petroleum reserves in order to help boost domestic supplies and to drive down rising gas prices that have angered consumers around the world. The White House will also be probing possible illegal conduct by oil and gas companies that it says are keeping gas prices artificially high.
So today I'm announcing that the largest ever release from the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve to help provide the supply we need as we recover from this pandemic. In addition, I brought together other nations to contribute to the solution. India, Japan, the Republic of Korea, and the United Kingdom have agreed to release additional oil from their reserves, and China may do more as well. This coordinated action will help us deal with the lack of supply, which in turn helps ease prices. The bottom line, today we're launching a major effort to moderate the price of oil, an effort that will span the globe in its reach and ultimately reach your corner gas station, God willing.
Now, as the American holiday of Thanksgiving approaches, many in the U.S. say they're having trouble feeding their families. Higher food costs caused by inflation have added to the challenge this year. Now, food banks are dealing with increased costs as well. CGTN's Hendrik Siebrandi with more.
Outside a Denver Human Services office, staffers and volunteers with Food Bank of the Rockies set up a mobile pantry. A wide menu of food items is prepared to be distributed to people in need, some of whom are lined up in their cars already.
In a typical week at this particular pantry, we could have anywhere from 75 to 100 families coming through. We anticipate maybe some more because we're so close to the holidays.
It promises to be a busy morning here.
So we're going to need 2 people, one right there and one here for traffic.
These boxes are essential for many.
Not having enough money for the holidays to buy food, and actually a lot of things on the shelf that you really need is gone or it's too expensive. So this here helps me.
Higher inflation has driven up food costs significantly across the U.S.
The prices of groceries have completely skyrocketed. It's really insane.
Cost of living is high, gas is high.
Yes.
I don't know. It's a constant struggle. It's very frustrating.
That struggle is now shared by this food provider. 80% of what Food Bank of the Rockies hands out is donated by retailers, manufacturers, and agricultural partners. It pays for the rest.
The amount of money that we are spending on food has more than tripled in the last 2.5 years. We're now spending almost $1 million every single month.
For example, the cost of beef has gone up 27% over the past year. Vegetable oil is up 54%, and canned fruit another 30%. Freight costs for the organization are up 25%, and some temporary U.S. government food commodities are not available. Many food banks are also dealing with supply chain issues. This trend and the need for help escalated when the pandemic hit.
I've never used food assistance, government assistance in my life, and I'm very grateful that it's available. I didn't know it was available, and if it wasn't available, I don't know what I would be doing right now.
I'm a single dad raising 3 girls and 2 boys on my own.
For Ernest Watson and many he knows, it's a daily struggle to get by.
It's ridiculous, even the gas. I mean, California is $5 a gallon. Like, low-income people, how can we afford that? You know, we barely trying to make it on ends meet now. This helps out tremendously.
Food Bank of the Rockies, which says each dollar buys 4 meals, is counting on the public to remain in a giving mood. 40% of its annual revenue comes at year's end.
We're not sure if the inflation that we've seen with food costs are going to maintain, but we're bracing for that.
These folks and others like them are counting on this service for the holidays and beyond. Hendrik Siebrandi, CGTN, Denver.
Now, times are certainly changing, and so are the younger generation in China. Gone are the days of excessive spending. Instead, we're now seeing a generation that is becoming more thrifty. Now, according to a recent study conducted by investment services provider Fidelity International and Alibaba's wealth management platform Ant Fortune, Young Chinese consumers are now becoming increasingly cautious with their money, with most now preferring to keep it for a rainy day. Here's CGTN's Yang Yunyi reporting.
The report shows that 44% of Chinese from the ages of 18 to 34 are now saving money at an increased rate, 25% up just this year. Not surprisingly, one of the main reasons for the jump is the COVID-19 outbreak. 27-year-old Lin Keqing is now not only saving money in the bank, but also getting involved with wealth management products. He began saving when the pandemic caused him to cut back on personal travel.
I have been saving money for 2 years. I usually save around 8,000 yuan every month, and there's over 200,000 yuan in my account now. I like traveling, but it's quite hard to travel now due to the pandemic, so I decided to save money for trips when travel restrictions are eased. Many people I know are also saving money now.
Many of those young people are also saving money for weddings or for spending during married life. 27-year-old Jin Luhao got married in May, and he began saving last year.
How to manage the rest of the income after all these expenses is quite important. Previously, I saved the money as I needed a lot of things for the wedding, but now I save money for family expenses. After getting married, I find there are more things that I need to spend money on, so I think it's quite wise to save money.
And experts say that changes in young people's consumption patterns during the COVID-19 outbreak also made saving easier for them.
We now see young people saving more money than before. That's because the COVID-19 outbreak has somehow changed their consumption patterns and socializing patterns. For example, to keep social distance, young people are spending less on outdoor activities like group dining. So they will be able to save more money. And the falling consumption choices during the COVID-19 outbreak has also made young people spend smarter. We think this trend will continue for a long time.
And in fact, surveys done before the COVID-19 period were indicating the same trend. A similar survey in 2018 showed younger Chinese saving at the rate of more than 1,300 yuan per month. So it looks like in the future, you can bank on the same behavior. Ying Junyi, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
And on that note, let's take a look at commodity markets today. Oil prices pretty steady. We did see Brent crude climbing to $82 per barrel as investors question the effectiveness of a US-led release of oil from its strategic reserves. And of course, they turn their focus to how producers will respond. Meanwhile, gold prices easing today. They continue to slide below the key $1,800 per ounce mark as we see the US dollar strengthening and investors bracing for minutes from the US Fed policy meeting and, of course, key economic data set to come out. Well, let's take a short break now. Still to come. We look at how the sunflower is changing fortunes for some communities in Nigeria.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Well, let's head to Tunisia now, where fishermen are steadily turning an invasive species, the blue crab, into a lucrative business. Now, Tunisia's blue crab exports rose significantly during the month of May this year, reaching over 2,000 tons with a value of more than $7 million. But as CGTN's Adnan Shaoshi now reports, fishermen in Tunisia are increasingly tapping into this niche market with the help of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization.
This is the port of the coastal town of Al-Mahras and the city of Sfax in Tunisia. It is located 300 kilometers from the capital city Tunis. Younes Hafez owns a fishing vessel. He says blue crab invasion spells doom for fishermen. With their sharp shells and claws, blue crabs ruin fishing nets and feed on other fish species also caught in the nets or traps.
Yes.
It is unbelievable how this invasive blue crab is spreading and expanding. It has devastated this whole sea area. It destroys our fishing nets and devours everything. As long as the weather is warm, the blue crab is everywhere. The water is getting warmer with climate change, so this invasive species proliferates and threatens biodiversity.
The first blue crab processing and marketing plant was created by the government on the island of Kirkina in 2019. It triggered a mini economic boom in the area. Yonga Fish is a Tunisian company specializing in the processing and conservation of seafood. This facts-based enterprise has turned the invasive blue crab species into a lucrative business. Private sector investments in blue crab processing plants have gone from simple packaging and freezing crow crabs to preparing cooked products.
A few years ago, blue crabs invaded our sea and were considered a curse because their numbers increased dramatically. Meanwhile, the fish and octopus populations were declining. Our company has turned the crabs into a source of wealth and income. We export them to all corners of the globe and provide foreign exchange to the state. They have created between 600 to 2,000 permanent jobs in each coastal city. We call on the Tunisian government to support us to increase exports to new markets.
Valerio Crespi is a fisheries and aquaculture officer for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations North Africa Office. FAO played an important role in coordinating actions taken by Tunisian authorities concerning the blue crab fishery. FAO delivered hands-on training of small-scale fishermen on best fishing practices. The use of multi-purpose traps has been promoted by FAO to avoid the use of plastic.
Through this new fishing trap, we were able to fish the crab and to keep the crab alive within the fishing gear. So we produce also a guide for the good fishing to promote the good fishing practices for this species. So it was produced and distributed to the fishermen, all the fishermen along the coast.
According to the Fisheries Department and FAO, 2 species of blue crab are currently present in Tunisia. The blue swimming crab reached the Tunisian coast through the Suez Canal in 2015. In 2019, total production of blue crab reached 15,000 tons. There are currently 22 crab processing plants in Tunisia, which provide job opportunities for many people, in particular women, living in coastal towns and cities. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Let's head now to Nigeria, where rising demand for sunflowers is creating employment for locals. The crop in Nigeria is considered one of the ancient plants used for various traditional health treatments. And as CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam now reports, many in Nigeria's rural communities are now taking to sunflower farming and packaging the crop for commercial purposes.
It's been nearly 1 year since Yosi Amos took to sunflower farming. The 62-year-old retiree sought to harness the medicinal properties of the plant for her family's health needs. But it turned out a profitable venture after she sold a portion of the crop and had more people requesting for it. Now Yosi is looking to expand her sunflower farm to meet up with rising demand.
People like it, they go for it. So the demand became so high and people were looking for it house to house. Yes, to fry and sell. They even came right in here to buy. I didn't take it to the market. You know, in these days, most of these days, people suffer from this rheumatism and arthritis. But most people testify that when they take the sunflower, as it is fried, it reduces all those pain.
Nigerians are embracing sunflower for its edible oils and remedial properties. Various studies have shown that it's rich in proteins, fiber and essential minerals which support the immune system and increase the ability to fight off viruses. Locals use the seeds, stems and leaves for various ailments ranging from detoxification purposes to the treatment of fungal infections, aches and pains, and management of high blood pressure.
A lot of people have been using the sunflower to take the boiled sunflower and drink, and then it helps to control most time when they come for BP checkup. You discover that their BPs are always regularized.
Sunflower has become an emerging commodity in the global market, valued at $2.5 billion. But Africa is yet to harness the gains as it contributes slightly just over 7% of the global output of 42.5 million metric tons. Health experts believe that with good research support, plants like sunflower can make for great pharmaceutical break in Africa.
If research are being sponsored and developed, I feel most of these things in our institutions, like the higher institutions and all that, these things should have been things that most of the students should have taken it as project topics. And then the developmental stage would move from one level to another. And by now, most of the professors would have taken it up and said, okay, we can now establish this as a fact, and then the pharmaceutical industry will pick it up, and then drugs can be produced.
Easy to farm and tolerant to drought, sunflower doesn't require fertilizer to thrive. As more attention is drawn to the crop for its rich dietary and medicinal components, farmers like Yossi believe that if the crop gains the much-needed government support, it will boost Nigeria's export earnings. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN, Jos Plateau, Nigeria.
And before we leave you today, a quick look at Africa's currencies. South Africa's rand pausing early today. That's after a losing streak, which was linked to a stronger US dollar and, of course, the contagion from Turkey's plummeting lira currency. Now, traders say with no major domestic economic data releases due today, analysts are expecting the rand to track global drivers once more. Meanwhile, Nigeria's naira closing today somewhat stronger at around 413.58 naira per dollar at the investors and exporters window, where a forex, of course, is traded officially, but it continues to fall significantly at the parallel market. It closed at around 559 naira per dollar. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team,